Greetings, my friends. I'm Joan Griffin, and I'm here with a new show we're calling Reading in the Wild. And I am very excited to be here with you. This is going to be a monthly event, and I've never done this before. So it's exciting and it's a little scary, but I know that you'll welcome me with any of the foolish initial mistakes that I make. So before we get into our topic of reading in the wild, I'd like to introduce who I am. I'm Joan Griffin. I am a Californian born and bred. I have lived in Northern California for the last 35 years. I taught middle school, 7th and 8th graders for 25 years in Colfax, mostly reading and writing and language arts. Now in retirement, I teach at Sierra College at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, or OLLI. So I'm teaching retired folks literature and women's history. But the other thing I've done in my retirement that I'm super proud of is that I am an author. And a year and a half ago, my book was published by Black Rose Writing. It's called Force of Nature. And the subtitle is 3 Women Tackle the John Muir Trail. It's an adventure story, it's a heartfelt memoir, and it's good nature writing. Maybe you'll check it out. But that's not why I'm here today. Today I'm here because I want to share a whole lot of books with you. We're going to come back every month and we're going to share 2 or 3 books every month. So what are those books that we're going to take a look at? Well, to celebrate last month's Earth Month, I curated a list of 30 books, all Earth-centered and nature-centered, but from across every genre. So there are hard science books, there are mysteries and thrillers, there's historical fiction, sci-fi, there's even one romance and one collection of short stories. And what I want to do over the next several months is bring you 2 or 3 of those books from that list each month and share them with you and try and convince you you're going to really want to read these books. 1 a month, 1 a week. We're going to start today, this month, with the oldest book on the list and the youngest book on the list. We're going to talk first about Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, which in fact was the book that kicked off the environmental movement and triggered the first Earth Day back in the 70s. And then I'm going to talk to you about this brand new, hot off the presses book, Heartwood by Amity Gage. It was just released on January 1st of this year. The books are similar in ways, but really extremely different. So let's start with Rachel Carson's masterpiece. Rachel Carson was a biologist, a woman in a man's world of science. And so she really had to work hard to find her place. And she was super concerned about the effect of chemicals in the environment, especially the insecticides that were being used willy-nilly on farms across the country. And in 1962, she put together her research in this book. The beauty is she's not just this amazing scientist, but she's an incredible storyteller. And I want to read you a couple of paragraphs from the opening chapter of that book, and perhaps you'll understand why enthusiasm for the book swept the nation and kicked off the environmental movement. So here it is, from the very first chapter. There was once a town in the heart of America where all life seemed to live in harmony with its surroundings. The town lay in the midst of a checkerboard of prosperous farms, with fields of grain and hillsides of orchards, where in spring white clouds of bloom drifted above the green fields. In autumn, oak and maple and birch set up a blaze of color that flamed and flickered across the backdrop of pines. Then foxes barked in the hills and deer silently crossed the fields, half hidden in the mists of fall mornings. That's a storyteller. Then a strange blight crept across the area. everything began to change. Some evil spell had settled on the community. Mysterious maladies swept the flocks of chickens. The cattle and sheep sickened and died. Everywhere was a shadow of death. It was a spring without voices. In the mornings, which had once throbbed with the dawn of a chorus of robins, catbirds, doves, jays, wrens, and scores of other bird voices, there was now no sound. Only silence lay over the fields, the woods, and the marshes. But no witchcraft, no enemy action had silenced the rebirth of a new life in this stricken world. The people had done it to themselves. I thought I had read this book 20 or 30 years ago. I was a biology major in college at UCLA. I have read excerpts of it. I've heard lectures about it. And I thought I had read the book, but it had been a long time, so I bought a new copy of the book and set out to read it about 6 or 8 weeks ago and realized I had not read it before. I was only familiar with it by rumor and legend. And I had to stop in the middle of the book for a pause because I was horrified. Horrified at what we had done to ourselves and our land and our crops. And I understood deeply why the people of the 60s stopped and looked at the world differently. Of course, it was fought by the chemical industry, savagely. But the people read it and passed it on from person to person to person. That's what the power of a book is. That's what the power of the word is. And people read it. It's truly unfortunate. But Rachel Carson died in 1964, only 2 years after this was published. She died of breast cancer, which back in the 60s had a 65% chance of killing you. So chemicals have been used for good, because today breast cancer only kills 5 or 10% of the people who are diagnosed with it. But chemicals have also been used for bad, and this is a perfect example of it. But I wasn't just horrified by what went on decades ago. I was horrified by the realization that we continue to do this to ourselves. Oh, the chemicals that we use now are not so harsh, not so sudden acting. They're much more subtle and long lasting. You and I have microplastics in our blood. There's microplastics everywhere. It's the same problem. It's the same chemical industry. It's the same lack of awareness. This book is absolutely fabulous. And I hope that if you have not read it, like I had not read it, or if you read it long ago, that you will pick it up and read it again. It is a masterpiece, along with the oil spill on the Santa Barbara coast, along with the river that was on fire in Ohio. This book is what triggered the creation of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which was signed into law by a Republican president, Richard Nixon, back in the 70s. We no longer can use those chemicals. DDT is forbidden in use in America. And I think that is a huge success. And it took a lot of people, a lot of courage, but it all started with a storyteller who was also a scientist who wrote a book and moved people to act. For the second book that we're going to talk about today, it's the latest book on my list of 30 books. And I want to pause here for a second and tell you about that list and how it came to be. So I had this wild notion that for the month of April, Earth Month, I wanted to put together one book for every day of the month, 30 books. I started with 100 that had been recommended to me or that I already loved. I whittled it to 50, then I whittled it to 30, And then I had to squeeze this book in because it was about to come out. So I had to bump another book off of the list in order to make room for this one. And why did I do that? Not only because it's brand new, but because it's about our contemporary world right now. The pandemic is in the past, and we are in absolute modern times. Something that's fabulous about this book is that it's about getting lost, and it's about getting found. It's about the person that gets lost, the people that try to do the finding, and it's this huge community effort, all populated by individuals acting on their own. So I wasn't the only one that chose this book. Jenna Bush Hager, daughter of the former president, who has her own TV show, a little bit like Reese Witherspoon's TV show, where she chooses a book a month to broadcast to her followers, which are legion. And this was her book for April, and I was so heartened to know that someone famous chose it too. I read this book in less than 36 hours. I could not put it down. It grabbed me by the throat from the first sentence. So what's it about? Well, it's about a woman in her 40s who decides she's going to walk the Appalachian Trail. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Appalachian Trail starts in Georgia, winds its way through the Appalachian Mountains, and lands at the top of the mountain in Maine. It's 2,200 miles long. And about 4,000 people a year start, but only somewhere between 700 and 1,000 people finish. It's quite the challenge. For those of us here in California are now thinking, oh, well, it's probably like the Pacific Crest Trail, or it's probably like the John Muir Trail that are in our own Sierra Mountains. No, it's the Appalachians are thick with trees. It rarely ever goes above tree line, and they're thick and wild with trees and underbrush, but it is also cut by lots of cross trails. It's pretty easy access to little towns to refill your supplies. And the woman hiking on the trail in this book is already about to enter Maine. She's covered lots of miles. She's very experienced. She's made friends along the trail. They call them tramily, as in trail family. And they each have names for themselves. It's a lovely community. Her husband is very supportive of what she's doing, and he meets her at each and every supply stop along the way to bring food and catch up on what's going on. And then she disappears. She's at one supply stop and meets her husband. They agree to meet a few days later at the next supply stop, and she never shows up. He waits a day because she's known to be late, but she doesn't show up. So then he goes to the authorities. And the authorities are the game wardens in Maine. And the head of the game wardens in this region is a woman in her 60s. She's been at this job for years. She's an expert in her field. She has a reputation for finding lost hikers within 48 hours. She whips together a team of her wardens in her organization, of retired wardens who volunteer to work with the crew, and other volunteers from all over. They're a team, an army, and they have some real systematic ways of going through the forest. They start with, where was she last seen? What were the clues? What did she say? And they have their maps, and they sweep along. Days go by, and they don't find her. And now it's made all the newspapers, not just local and regional, but across the entire country. And people are coming out of the woodwork to help. And one person who really wants to help is an 80-year-old woman in a retirement village who is a bit on the obsessive side and she loves internet research. So she decides she's going to dig around. She's going to look at maps, research articles, people's posts about the trail, and she's going to figure things out that way. So it's about 3 women, 1 who gets lost, 2 who are searching. But it's also very much an inner story about being lost and hopefully found. So where did the idea for the book come from? From a real story about a real woman, a nurse who got lost on the Appalachian Trail in 2013. And they never found her. The search went on for months and they never found her. Until 2 years later, they found her body in her sleeping bag, in her tent, with her journal sitting next to her, not far from the trail. And her journal was filled with letters. Letters to her friends, letters to her family, letters to her mother. And the letters at first were super hopeful. I know they're going to find me. I've heard the search planes. I have food for X number of days. And then they start to deteriorate. I've run out of food. I have 3 M&Ms left, that sort of thing. And then her last message is very short and very shaky, and she dies. Well, the character in our book also has a journal and also writes letters to her family, especially her mother. And I'm not going to tell you, but I can tell you, you don't find out what happens until like the last page or 2 of the book. And I had my heart in my throat for practically the whole time. So we have 2 books here. Now, why did I choose them to celebrate Earth Month? This one is an obvious one, right? It kicked off Earth Month. It kicked off Earth Day. Last month, there were thousands and thousands of Earth Month and Earth Day celebrations all around the world. You can go to the earthday.org website and you can see a map of the globe with all the little flags on it that show where every event took place, and there are thousands of them. This book gave voice to the people, and that voice is still there, and we are still fighting for our environment, our Mother Earth, and our own lives in a sense. But how does this book fit in there? Well, one of the things I've found that if you give a hard speech, if you hand someone a thick science tome, someone you're trying to convince of something, very often they set it aside. They can't read it. It's not their thing. They're not interested. But if you hand them a novel with an earth or science-based theme threaded through it, but a novel that intrigues them in other ways, they're very likely to pay attention. And they might even change their mind about something. How did she get lost if the trail is so well marked, so frequently crossed, so close to main highways? She got lost because in Maine, and hikers on the AT know this, it's the hardest part of the trail. The forests up there are thick, not like our California Sierra forests where you can see through the trees and then you break out up top and you can see forever. But you can't see 10 feet in front of you. And if you set your pack next to the trail, as you're supposed to, as your marker, and you walk 20 feet off the trail to take a morning pee, and you turn around to admire the wildflowers or the trees, and you lose which direction you came, you can't see the trail. In this book, the environment is a character. It's both a terrifying character and a welcoming character. And it plays as big a role as the searchers do in the story. So it's something I think that will catch a lot of eyes that might not be interested in reading an old science book by a woman scientist. So what now? Well, maybe you should recommend one of these books for your book club. I know my book club would love to read either one of them, but I'm planning to recommend Heartwood to them. Why? Because it offers up all these opportunities for really interesting questions. What would you do if you lost sight of the trail? What would you do if you only had so much food left? You knew they were searching for you, but you only had this remaining to you. What would you do? What would you write in those letters to your mom and your husband? How would you approach it if you were the searchers? What are the clues in the book that you would have missed or that you would have seen? So I think there's a lot here to discuss. And my book club is full of people who love to hike as well as love to read. And so this would be right up their alley. So my book club loves to plan meals around the themes of a book. And I could just picture us, we do potluck, I could just picture us doing kind of a charcuterie board idea of finger foods, like we're grazing, sitting on a log in the forest. So there would be the crackers and the spreads and the nuts and the dried fruits and maybe just for fun, a little Gatorade, because that's what you drink on the trail. So I think it would be fun to graze through our meal in community and pretend we were in one of those huts they have alongside the trail. But for dessert, ice cream with chocolate on top, because every hiker on a long distance trail dreams of ice cream. In fact, the stops along the John Muir Trail, which I've hiked, they have these giant freezers that are filled with ice cream bars, Haagen-Dazs and other ice cream bars, because every hiker who gets to that point drops their bag outside of the store and stumbles in, dirty and disheveled, and heads immediately to the freezer for an ice cream. So I think that would be super fun. And maybe it would be fun for everybody to come dressed up like they were going to go for a hike. Hiking boots, the vest, the hat. It would be really fun. I think it could be an excellent way to celebrate this book with your book club. And with that, I want to preview what we're going to talk about next month. I have two books that I've selected where the authors, Barbara Kingsolver, a very famous author, and Cam Torrens, a much less famous but equally good author, both set their fictional stories in their hometown or their home region. Barbara Kingsolver's books, many of them including Flight Behavior, which is the one I'm going to choose, is set in Appalachia where she lives, in the rolling mountains with the beautiful spring and the gorgeous fall. And it's a terrific story where we will follow a young woman who's discovering not only the outer world, but who she is. And Cam Torrens lives in the Colorado Rocky Mountains. And he's a volunteer with Search and Rescue. So his stories take place in those fierce, challenging mountains and always have to do with somebody who needs rescue from the environment. And so we're going to look at both of those. And yes, I will bring book club ideas for both of them as well. And before I sign off from Reading in the Wild, I want to tell you about my book. Take this opportunity. You can find it anywhere that books are sold if you're interested. It's about 3 interesting women tackling an absolutely gorgeous environment that is in our own backyard. But we tackle it in a way that only a very few people in the world ever have the opportunity to. We've all gone on little hikes in the foothills, maybe even longer overnight hikes up in the mountains, but we were out there for almost 30 days, and I hope you'll take the journey and hike along with us. With that, I'm Joan Griffin, wishing you happy reading in the wild.